Sexto Encuentro Académico, UNIMINUTO virtual y a distancia. Apropiatic. Uso y apropiación de la tecnología para el aprendizaje en UNIMINUTO. Bogotá, 30 de noviembre y 1 de diciembre de 2015. Prepárate desde ya para este encuentro con los mejores. UNIMINUTO virtual y a distancia. Educación de calidad al alcance de todos. Stefanía Druga. Naturalmente curiosa y apasionada sobre la creación y prueba de nuevos modelos de aprendizaje, diseñadora instruccional de formación, convertida en una arquitecta de modelos y nuevas formas de aprendizaje. Stefanía es una antigua trabajadora de Google y se graduó en un máster de Ingeniería de Medios para la Educación en Erasmus Mundus International, Francia, España y Portugal. Actualmente dirige la organización HacKidemia, laboratorio móvil presente en 40 países para fabricar educación. AfriMakers, comunidad que diseña proyectos en 10 países de África. Maker Camp, campos globales para aprender a construir y ejecutar Makerspace. Es embajadora mundial del Maker Fair en Berlín y Shenzhen y está preparando un nuevo kit para la fabricación de educación en escuelas. Ella siempre está en la búsqueda de maneras creativas para combinar hardware y software con arte, música y diseño.
Sí, mi nombre es Stefanía, llego desde Nueva York, donde estoy viviendo ahora, pero estoy nacida en las montañas en Rumania y he vivido por muchas partes del mundo. Si puedo tener mis slides, aquí están. Entonces, hoy le quería hablar de la educación con niños, como lo ha dicho Viviana, que empieza a cambiar la mentalidad de cómo estamos usando la tecnología desde muy temprano. So, HacKidemia as an organization comes from 3 words. Hacking, which doesn't mean breaking into bank accounts. It means that's cracking, it's a difference. Hacking means reverse engineering. It means how do we work with what we have and change it so it solves problems for us. How do we improvise? Kids, because we work with children of all ages, like from 6 years old to 88 years old, I say. We focus on kids of 10 to 12. And academia, because we're trying to hack academia, we're trying to change the way children learn and make it such that it becomes education for the 21st century. So, what we do is that we design hands-on, practical workshops and projects for maker education and do-it-yourself learning. I don't know if you heard about this term, maker educations. In recent years, a lot of communities have started to organize this kind of hobby projects with building robots, building musical carpets. I'm going to show you examples of projects. And then creating like all these big events called maker fairs. So that brought back like the attention to crafts and the attention to hands-on in education. So you will see that for us it's a mixture. We use online and offline, but we think it's important, especially when we talk about engineering, technology, science, art, design, and especially kids that don't have a strong capacity of abstraction, to have this tangible experience. Because for hundreds of years, we evolved to discover and explore the world with our hands and learn also by touching and feeling. So this is what we do. And our mission is to empower children to become makers of technology, arts, and science. I think today, when we have our phones, tablet, computers, and we see our kids, the teenagers, like be always like on Facebook and use technology, we think like, oh, they are so much more advanced and they are so much more used to technology. But I think it's really important to realize that they are consuming this technology, not creating this technology. And I think that's a very, very important difference. Who makes those decisions? Who decides how Facebook is like the interface of Facebook or what we should have on the internet? I think only a handful of people are in decision-making positions because they know how to program, because they really understand the complexity of technology. And for the vast majority, it gets so simplified that we become mere consumers with the impression we are modern and we know technology very well. So I wanted to change that, and I thought the best way of changing it is to start early on and show kids what is it inside our phone? How does it actually work? What's inside this device? How does it allow me to change the slides? Like, how do I go to the bits and atoms of everything we use? And the cool thing with kids is that they ask all the time, why does it do that? How does it work? Why? And after 5 whys, you get to the bottom of things, and you really need to understand the base concepts. So what we did in the past 3 years is that we start training teachers and mentors like yourself all around the world to organize these workshops with kids, because the goal was not for us to come and do it in the school. The goal was to have the local community to create these workshops and adapt them to what kids like in different countries. I wish this would work better. So what we do is that we combine science with the hands-on, the making that I told you, and inspiration. And we do this in schools, but also outside of schools, in museums, community centers, maker spaces, hacker spaces, fab labs, all sorts of theaters, all sorts of community spaces, because we believe that learning happens everywhere. These are the type of workshops that we do. Everything from learning about 3D printing and how we could customize very, very specific that we need, to learning how to use like lemons to generate electricity or make a speaker out of paper. The range of activities really varies. There's a lot of microelectronics, there's a lot of technology, like experiments that you could do at home today when you go back to your kitchen and learn how to extract DNA from strawberries just by using soap and alcohol. I bet you didn't know that you can do that. And while we were doing this, we were constantly wondering, how could we create a hybrid model so we can actually scale this and bring this into schools around the world? Because the way kids learn computer science and technology in schools is by learning how to use PowerPoint and Word. I think we should do much more. Just like Casey was saying this morning, we need to see where the ball is going, right? Like, this is the future. It's not Word and PowerPoint, and it's not using an app. It's how can we actually learn to design those kind of applications. So when we were doing these workshops, the main question was always, how do we make the training for mentors, the capacitation for more teachers, more easy? How do we document this kind of experiences? Because you cannot teach electronics only online. How do we create a good mix of online and offline? Because there's only as many teachers that I could train in 1 year, and my colleagues can train in 1 year. So that doesn't work. So in order to tell you how I got there, I wanted to share, this is where I come from. I wanted to share my experience of trying many different models of education. So the first time I started working with kids was in Romania, this 2007, when we joined the European Union, and a lot of the parents had to go abroad. Just like in Colombia, a lot of people had to go to the United States to work, and then the kids were left home alone. And at the time, I was a student, and I thought, wow, this is such a big problem, because these kids are going to feel neglected, and they are missing, like, the parents are not there to encourage them to explore many different talents and many different things. So I thought, okay, I'm going to convince my colleagues. I was part of the student organization in Timișoara, which is the city where I studied. I'm going to convince my colleagues to come with me to kindergartens and schools. And we're going to do a Christmas surprise celebration and event for the parents. So when parents come back from Spain, France, Portugal to Romania, they're going to discover, oh, my daughter knows how to play the guitar, or my son really likes drawing, or my daughter knows how to build something with wood. And they never had the time to provide all these diverse experiences to their kids. But the good news is that my colleagues that were students are future parents. And by doing this project with kids in kindergartens and schools, they understood that what children actually need the most is their parents' time and attention. And I know that's very hard to provide, I know. But we started doing this and we had like an amazing experience. The project is still continuing today. It's called Prikinder, which in Romanian means little child. And then this inspired me. I realized, first of all, I realized that kids learn extremely fast, that they have so many talents, and that I want to continue to work with kids for the rest of my life. So I did an internship as part of my master in Peru, so that's how I learned Spanish. In 2008, I lived in Peru for 4 months, and I was training teachers from initial education, from primary schools from all around Peru, to integrate technology into their classroom. The cool thing was that at the time, we had to go to cybercafes to have access to internet. So they would teach like how to use like the computer on a blackboard, on a traditional blackboard. And then we would go to the cybercafe. These were like 6-year-old. And then they would tell me, oh, you look like this singer on YouTube. And, but it was very interesting because this posed a lot of constraints into how kids, they had to think ahead of time. What am I going to do? I have limited time. How am I going to test, my project? How do I share with my colleagues? And I thought, like, I love showing this example. So in other parts of the world, I thought it was very ingenuous. Like, okay, maybe we don't all have computers, or maybe there is no internet in the school. In 2008, that was the case. What can we do? How can we create a community center? How can we mobilize? This is hacking, by the way. How can we mobilize all the resources we have access to still provide a global access to learning? And after this experience, I work for Google, and I learn a lot about how these decisions are made at a very high level, but I also learned that it's really hard to push like true impact and a meaningful agenda for learning coming from corporations. So after trying really, really hard to do education projects with them, I decided to quit because it didn't work. Like education wasn't making money for them. And I went to Cambodia. This is in Southeast Asia, where I started volunteering with 100 children of all ages. And this was my classroom. This is where I was teaching in Cambodia. And you can imagine like the contrast, right? Like from working for Google in Ireland to come here and spend 4 months teaching, it really changed my life, because I realized, first of all, I was teaching English, we created their first blogs, but I realized that these kids and their community knew so much more about building things, about surviving, about being resourceful than I will ever do. My phone got robbed, so I lost my phone. And then I was like I couldn't find my way. And then I realized how dependent we are on this technology. And then I realized that people here, they knew how to fix their motorbike. They knew how to build anything with their hands. They were teaching me like all the different rice cultures. They were like extremely, extremely good with their hands. And then I thought, okay, why don't we do an exchange? Because that's what learning is about. It's not someone from abroad coming here to teach. It's more like we're all learning from each other, because we all had different life experiences, and we don't choose where we're born. Newsflash, right? I come from a small village in Transylvania. So I was there and I realized, okay, for kids, they get very engaged to do these hands-on projects. And they also love, because only the older ones spoke English and the younger ones spoke Khmer. I speak a lot of languages. Khmer is an impossible language to learn. So I had to train the older kids to teach the younger kids. And we created what in constructivism or Vygotsky calls like circles of learners. And that was amazing, because in traditional school, we would split students by age, right? But actually here, I had to mix all the students of all ages together, and then the older ones would teach to the younger ones, who teach to the younger ones. But that was great because when we had students that wanted to go faster, they could build a project with their older colleagues. And they also got social responsibility and engagement because they cared about how their friends and their family was understanding what they had to explain. And I really think that the best way of learning something is to teach it to someone else, which is what they did. And this inspired me to create HacKidemia. I was like, there's something here. There's something in this approach of teaching kids how to become teachers and using like local interest and local know-how and hands-on experiences and combine it with the power of internet, with the power of new technology. And that's what pushed me to create HacKidemia. And after Cambodia, like I got back to France, to Europe, and I joined a research center where they were doing learning through research. It's called the CRI, Centre de Recherche Interdisciplinaire. We start going to schools which in France are considered like ZEP, Zone d'Éducation Prioritaire, where kids are failing or kids are left behind. And a lot of the students were also from migrant descent. They didn't speak French very well. So we went there. We wanted to prove that with this approach and methodology, we can get kids interested into science. We could get them to have better results in exams. And we could get also more girls interested into these fields. And we start organizing this workshop. This workshop in particular is, you can also do it at home. It's making dough, like for pizza or for bread. And then if you add lemon juice, it becomes conductive. So then we could create these sculptures. It's called squishy circuits. We could create these sculptures that had like any sort of animal with LED lights. And for kids, they loved it because first of all, it was like manual, they had to design. Then it was like electronics, they had to understand why it conducts electricity. And then they got to present. So I did this in France, and the result was really good. And then I got invited to this project at NASA called Singularity University, where I was working with students from all around the world to learn how we could solve like the challenge of education and many other global challenges. And I convinced many of my colleagues here in this program at NASA and students to join me and continue to do these workshops. And then we start like really like teaching people, this was in Budapest, how to use, for example, like old webcams and transform them into microscopes. Or like, and come up with all sorts of the ideas for zoom and mechanism, how to use mud to generate electricity, the DNA extraction of strawberries. I love this example because when we teach software to kids, it's usually always digital, but it's really hard to understand. Like, for example, this is how we teach Photoshop. How many of you have heard about Photoshop? Okay, Photoshop is a very known software for making designs, but it's very complex. And the way it works is that you have different layers. So when you design something, you design like each layer would have a change to the design. And this is how we teach it to kids. And make their own toys, customize the toys, make animations with light. And this was in Africa, in Nigeria. I really love this example because he's like 12, and he used these injections that we would normally throw away to design a crane that had 12 controllers, and he was using water pressure and hydraulics to control his crane. This kid is 12. He was never trained by anyone how to do this. And he did it in 2 days at Maker Faire in Lagos, right? I love showing this example because if I would give this project to a group of engineering students in France, they would probably spend a month talking about what they would do, and then make a design and then figure out it doesn't work. And with kids, it's not like that. They don't know, but they're not afraid of trying. So it's a trial and error, trial and error. What would this button do? Okay, this doesn't work. Let's try this again. They're not afraid of failing. And I think like that comes from their desire to play. And this is something that we as adults can also remember, because I think really playing is like riding a bicycle. We don't forget it. We just have to remember it. So we're gonna play in the workshop this evening. But yeah, like all sorts of like crazy projects with music. Like this is a DIY guitar. So they made their own guitar. We're gonna use it with Makey Makey. And also, because we're talking about online, the kids were the ones who were recording their projects, their final presentations, their demos, and sharing that with other students and with their parents. And I thought that was very important because the way they would tell the story of what they learned and how they did it is very different than the way we would tell the story, right? So this is how a normal workshop looks like. It's chaotic, it's very creative, everyone learns, the mentors learn from the kids learn from the mentors. Here they were doing some crazy hats that move and have like servos and antennas. And the most important element, and I hope if you have kids, you'll take this home with you, is the involvement of parents. The fact that the parents come and the workshops together with our students is crucial. Because what we bring is just the initial spark. The most important element is what continues at home afterwards. And we say our education is for kids, but actually, really, it's for everyone in the family. Because parents learn, grandparents learn. But it's easier for them to learn if they think, oh, this workshop is for kids. I'm just there, you know, like to observe. But actually, everyone is learning, and they're learning together. And for us, this was the biggest learning. Like, the parents were the ones that pushed our projects into schools, start organizing workshops. They would bring food to share at the break of work. Like, it really became a community project. And I thought that was very, very important. And the best part is that all students become mentors. This is also in Budapest, and I love showing this picture because the student on the right side, after like learning how to program Arduino, which is a board to measure air pollution for the first time in his life, changed the code and was showing to everyone and to his teacher and to his colleagues how he improved the code one day. And I also love this example because I think in traditional education, we create a lot of limits. You should learn about complex math when you're a certain age. You should be allowed to use a soldering iron when you're a certain age. Those limits were imposed on me. I was an extremely, extremely curious child, and I wasn't allowed to play with this until very late. And I think it's a shame. So when I grew up, I was like, I actually want to create a school where kids are allowed to be as curious and explore as much as they want. And in this workshop, we actually have a student who is 6 years old, and she's soldering a sound to light unit. So she created this necklace that would light up when people talk to her, right? And she spent 2 hours non-stop soldering, like melting the metal to create this piece. And her parents were there, and I was there, and we were like, oh, do you want some water? You want to take a break? No. And in no normal school, we would allow a 6-year-old to solder. And I think that's a shame, because I think, first of all, like, kids are doing more dangerous things. This is not, you know. And then second, like, why should we, I really wonder, why should we impose the limits that were imposed on us when we were growing up to our kids? The times have changed, and they have no limits. If they want to solder, we should be there and solder with them. And that's just an example. So I wanted to share some lessons that I gathered from working with children for all these years. I realized that they love to play together, that collaboration is key, not competition. Having projects where they have to help each other, where they have to learn from each other, is key. I also really learned that they love to customize their learning environment, and this applies also to an online learning environment. If they can make it theirs, if they can feel, I made something here that makes this place mine. I can feel like I belong here. I feel like home. I want to learn here. It's key. And that's why we did a couple of camps. So we did these camps where kids would take over like shipping containers and transform them into invention labs. This was during the summer. And then use that as a place for learning and for playing. We also learned that kids learn everywhere, like I said in the beginning. These are a couple of workshops we start doing in hospitals, because we have kids that spend a lot of time in hospitals being bored and thinking about their disease. So we thought it would be very important to go there, and instead of allowing, you know, like, and bring a positive light and allowing them to do something creative with their time. I also really think that we tend to underestimate how I treat kids like adults. Like, we tend to underestimate their desire to learn real things, to see the application of what they learn, and to give them the agency and the power to get involved in their community. they really want to solve real problems. Like here, it's a glove that kids design for deaf people so they can speak sign language in the dark. And this is like a project where they were measuring air pollution so people could see in China, like, okay, it's not safe to get outside right now because there's too much traffic and the air pollution is too bad. This was in Egypt, very similar project. This was in Nigeria where they soldered by hand. This is really hard to do, by the way. This is pure art. They made this transformer from AC to DC because they have power cuts. They lose electricity all the time. So these 12-year-olds decided, okay, we don't want our fridge and our TV to break all the time, so we're going to make a transformer. And they just did it. And I also think that kids can see things that we don't see anymore. This gentleman on the left-hand side is one of the fathers of internet. His name is Werner Winch. He created the TCP/IP protocol, and I convinced him to let one of our students join him in the jury of deciding what are the most ambitious startup ideas at a competition in Berlin. And the fact that he was open, like he's one of the creators and fathers of internet, the fact that he was open to allow a child to be next to him in a jury for the next startups, I think that's an important lesson. This was like, I wanted to share a quick story, and I'm going to wrap up with this, of teaching teachers in Brazil. So in 2012, I was in Sao Paulo, and these were a group of teachers I was working with, and we did all the workshops that we normally do, created new workshops, and then we had to go in the favelas and run the workshops there. And this was very interesting because when we got to the favelas, the kids were, this was right before the Olympics, and there was a lot of social unrest. And then the kids start throwing away the electronics, screaming, they didn't want to do anything. And as an educator, like in that situation, it's really hard to manage because none of your social norms apply. What do? Do you start screaming at them? No, it doesn't work. So what I decided to do, and I also realized that although they saw me as gringa or foreigner, and they thought, oh, she's coming here from a privileged position, although, you know, I was not, I decided in that situation to take my computer out and show them a video of kids in Nigeria using exactly the same materials, doing the same projects. And when they saw that, these were the students in the favela in Sao Paulo, when they saw that, they were like, oh, if they can do it, we can do it as well. Like, this is not, you know, like someone trying to come here and preach us. This is something bigger. It goes beyond the social reality we are living in. And then they decided, okay, we want to start building things, and you should film us, and you should show to other kids what we're doing in Sao Paulo. And it completely shifted their approach to learning. And I thought that was like very important. So yeah, these are some of the projects that we've been doing. There's many more on our website. I really wish this would work. We also created a book of projects, especially with the experiences from Africa. And yeah, if I wanted to leave you with something today is that I think when we talk about learning, like, we should see technology just as a means to an end, and we should remember that it comes back to the community. And even if the community is online, offline, a mixture, I think that's the most important element to, in my opinion, to remember that we are social animals. We like to be surrounded by people, and we like to learn from people, and we like to share things with people. And for kids, it's the same. So yeah, I'm again very grateful to have been here and be allowed to share this experience with you. And I hope that you will come and actually do things, because that's the real way to understand what we do at HacKidemia in the workshop this evening. And I'm going to close here for questions. Thank you very much.
Stephanie, thanks a lot for your presentation. Now we have some questions from the audience about your work. We have some from teacher Ligia Telles, and she wants to know what characteristics do you plan when you are making a workshop in each of the different countries and the context that you work on?
What characteristics?
Like, how do you plan the project, the complete workshop?
So normally the way we do it is that we have like 10 or 15 workshops, and there are different tables. It's like a library of workshops. And then when we train the mentors to be responsible for one project and have all the materials, everything on the table, and then when kids come with parents, they get to choose, oh, I want to do printing, or I want to build a robot, or I want to make a game. And we don't impose a schedule. They choose what they want to do, because we discovered that if we give them the freedom of choice, that they spend much more time focusing on a project and finishing a project. So they will start, for example, maybe over here at this table with robotics, and then they hear their friends having a lot of fun at the game table. They're going to go and do a game. We tell them that at the end of the workshops, usually the workshops take a whole day, they will have to demo, make a presentation like I'm doing one now, and show what they learned and what they built. And then the parents also come to the presentation. So that's how, those are like the characteristics. We spend like 3-4 days training the mentors to do the workshop. And a lot of times like we go to the local market to find like what materials they have access to, or talk to them to see what they would like to build, and adapt it locally to what's relevant in each and individual context.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have a question for our Vice Chancellor Viviana Rodriguez. She wants to know, do you think that we have the ability to go back to be children in order to use technology? How can we make these things happen with young and adults in superior education?
Yeah, I think like it needs to start, like when we teach usually kids, we always talk about you need to have these skills to get this job and for this career. Kids don't care about jobs and career yet, right? So I think when we work with kids, what's important is to start from what they like start from any sort of interest they have, and then grow that and nurture it. And then enable them to be exposed to as many different experiences so they become more curious. So it's not a utilitarian approach. It's actually like, okay, our goal is to make you curious. Because if you're curious, you're going to learn everything you know by yourself. And you're going to find the resources you have to achieve what you want to do. But how do we make you be extremely, extremely curious? And how do we allow you to see how you could start and finish a project? Because I think that's a very important skill. And to do that with adults, it's more difficult, but it's possible. I think it's, again, starting from people's interests. Like, what is it that you always wanted to do? When I was doing that maker camp, the adults, people always wanted to build, like take the time to work outside and build things with wood, and they were like, what if I could spend a whole month in my life without worrying about my job and everything else, and just build a project that I always dreamt of doing? And that's what we did, and we got them scholarships to be able to focus on that. I think we all still have passion and interest, and it's a matter of starting from that interest and then learning everything else around it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Now we have a question from Alejandro Cuervo. He wants to know, how can circles of learning be implemented in all virtual education environments?
That's a great question. I'm sorry I don't have a selfie stick to come to you right now, but yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's happening, for example, naturally with social media, because when you're like studying for an exam or doing a project, you look online and see, have other people wrote about this? Have other people been in the same situation? Can I talk to them, right? And for example, on a Moodle platform or any other sort of online platform, I think it's really good to allow people to add a bio or a description or show the project they're working on in order to enable other students to find, you know, like similar like interest and similar projects or complementary projects. Like maybe, for example, I'm designing a microscope and I know everything about the optics of it, but I don't know everything about the mechanics, like how do I make the case? So I want to find another student that can help me with that. I think having like a portal where you could search for people by skills, by interest, motivation, could help to create those learner circles. Of course, there are some complications to that. It could generate clustering, but as in, you would maybe want to work only with people who know better than you, or only with people that have certain skills. And you actually want to generate diversity, right? So those are some of the limitations of creating this online. I looked into it a lot because I was working on a recommender platform for resources online, kind of like Amazon. Do you know Amazon? Yeah, kind of like Amazon for learning. So instead of recommending me things to buy, recommending me things to learn. So I looked into this a lot, and I think it's definitely something that will be developed in the next years.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from our Vice Chancellor, Viviana Rodriguez, and she wants to know, how do you think that we can do in order to give the responsibility to young people to learn? I mean, that people want to learn from these kind of things, but giving the responsibility to them directly.
Yeah, so I think like that's like the most important element, like for them to understand your like opportunity comes with a responsibility. I think we all have talent, but we don't all have opportunity. And for a lot of these kids, especially in underprivileged area, to understand like, I'm so lucky to be here today and do this workshop and have this access. And that comes with the responsibility of sharing back. So when I'm gonna go back to my school, I'm gonna share with all my colleagues what I learned. And even here today, I'm gonna share by doing the demo and the presentation. But what I love about this, every time I ask our students, like, how many of you want to teach this, or how many of you are going to share this back? Everyone is like, almost everyone wants to do it. I think there are a lot of soft skills, because we talk about engineering and math and programming, but actually what stays behind with our students is this soft skill of wanting to share back in the community, the curiosity, the desire to work together. And there are not like fixed recipes or, you know, success stories on how best to do this. It's being negotiated socially in every single social context.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Oscar Tibaduiza. He wants to know, what way do you think the cognitive structure of students can include new learnings through these workshops that you do?
Cognitive structure of the students can include new... I think it's very interesting how we deal with complexity in learning, and one of the cognitive structures that come from this kind of approach is recognizing patterns. So when I deal with a complex problem, it's all about problem solving. So I have a complex problem, like how do I measure air pollution, right? As a child, normally, like when you're being taught this in school, it would be separated into different curriculum options. I'm going to learn the chemistry of it in chemistry class, and I'm going to learn like, oh, the environmental problems in environmental class, and I'm going to learn the mechanics of how to design the state. But I don't see it all coming together. So one of the more like important elements of our work is that it's interdisciplinary. And then they see the direct impact, like, they understand why they need to learn this. And also they understand what happens when it doesn't work. Like, okay, I design a monitoring station, like pollution station. I'm getting the data. How do I analyze data? So in a way, we are actually giving kids the handles to deal with the complex world we live in. And in terms of cognitive structure, I think what computing brings to people is this ability of breaking down complexity into concepts that we can grasp and operate with.
Thank you very much. We have some other question from Mr. Robinson Garcia. He wants to know, how would you integrate these competences that you develop in the workshops in media education and superior education?
Yeah, so I didn't include in slides, but I created a platform called MakeHub where we share the videos from the workshops and also the documentation, the tutorial for each project, and allow people to remix these projects and modify them and share them back. Or for example, if you're a teacher and you want to build any of these workshops in your classroom, and you say, this is for 9-year-old, I want to do it for older kids, to allow you to adapt that. So I'm working on a platform for that, where we are able to digitize and document these hands-on experiences. I think this is going to be a big challenge on both sides, both for institutions providing massive online classes and for communities of makers, because they are complementary, but right now there is no in-between. And I really think in the future, like, for me, there's no question, like, I actually like when Casey asked this morning about online, offline. I think there's no question of choice there. We're definitely going to need an online element, because the number of students that are coming to become educated is growing exponentially. And we are just not able to build institutions fast enough to educate all these people. There are a lot of studies that show this, and then even if our education system was perfect, we would still need to create a hybrid future model just because there are too many people that come to be educated. And I think and this is just, it's very subjective, it's my personal opinion, I think in the future we're going to have a part of instruction and education that will happen online, but there's going to be another element where people in the local community could gather and say, oh, you're doing that class, I'm doing that class as well. Let's meet in the weekends in the local library or in the local community center or in any sort of space and talk about our questions and build something together. So I would like to see both worlds converging in the future. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Sexto Encuentro Académico, UNIMINUTO virtual y a distancia. Apropiatic. Uso y apropiación de la tecnología para el aprendizaje en UNIMINUTO. Bogotá, 30 de noviembre y 1 de diciembre de 2015. Prepárate desde ya para este encuentro con los mejores. UNIMINUTO virtual y a distancia. Educación de calidad al alcance de todos.